Hola. So where are you right now?
Hola, I am in Mountain View, California, but
Lovely.
not for long.
Because you're going to,
We're moving to Barcelona
oh my God,
in August.
lucky us in Europe.
Yes, lucky us to be joining you in Europe.
Does that mean you're going to change work jobs or are you going to work remotely?
I'm still figuring out. So, but yes, most of Meta's roles out of London are now remote, or kind of they're open to remote. So you can choose if you want to work out of the office or if you want to be based remotely, which is nice.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. I would like to hear a little bit about what you do because, we can look back a little bit if needed about your experience in PayPal and where you were before when you were not Meta, but you were Facebook but tell me a little bit about your job, what you're doing right now with Novi.
With Novi. Okay. Sounds good. And I can give sort of a quick background as well if that is helpful.
Yes.
But the way I like to think of myself is of a kind of a global citizen. And so that's something that also has been a big part of my professional career, is building solutions that are global in nature and tackle problems that are real problems, or add some meaningful value to people's lives, right? And those can come in a lot of different shapes and flavors, but that is something that is personally important to me. Other than that, my kind of a big passion for me, is to travel the world, to live in different countries and cultures, and learn a lot of different languages. And so while kind of when I was younger, it was very like, this part of like who I am. I think over time it definitely became a big part of me professionally as well. And I think now kind of in this post-COVID or world when the world is becoming even more interconnected in many ways because we can work remotely, we can work with people from anywhere. It's definitely something that I'm enjoying, that we don't no longer need to work in country silos, but we can really think about the world when we build our teams. We can bring the best people no matter where they want to live. And people can make those decisions based on lifestyle, or kind of where they want to live their personal lives. Doesn't need to be connected just to where a company is located. So that's just kind of a little bit about how who I am and what I care about, and how that connects to my professional life. I've tried a bunch of different careers. And it's definitely been a trial and error sort of thing. So I started off with management consulting, moved on to business development, worked in venture capital and private equity. Realized that I wanted to be more hands-on in terms of building a business, building technology. And that's when I joined PayPal to lead the Sub-Saharan Africa business unit. That was incredible. Primarily, the first reason I took the job was that the one continent I haven't been to was Africa at the time. And so the possibility of traveling for free around Africa, pretending like I was working, was a huge attraction. And indeed it proved to be incredible, but also helped me see firsthand, the importance of technology and financial tools for people's lives, especially in markets. And kind of, I'm talking about Sub-Saharan Africa as a whole. Obviously, there's a huge variety in a lot of different countries, and they're all very different. But
isn't it true as well? I don't know what your experience exactly was around that, but when you're there and you find that people use as currency the money they have on the phone, the value because that's the most stable they have available. And when the coup happens and the banks are taken, the big mobile companies, so they send money to each other using the cash they have inside the account. When you see people creating currency and agreeing on what, that must have been as well mind-blowing to you as you're so creative and open.
Absolutely. I think when I just started traveling to Africa and kind of spending a lot of time there, and, living in Kenya for a few weeks and hitching rides with, they have, I forget what they're called, but it's basically, like guys on scooters, instead of taxis, it's like,
Yes.
no Uber,
Yeah.
it's just like guys on scooters, and you kind of like hail one. Yeah, exactly. You jump on, and then, and you pay everyone in M-Pesa, right? And at that time, I was working for PayPal. In order to open a PayPal account and be able to use it, you need to have a bank account with a debit card that you can link to your PayPal so you can then send money. But obviously that didn't work for that market, right? Like for 99% of people, it makes no sense. But also in so many ways, they have leapt forward, like their technology in some ways were so much more advanced because everyone is doing mobile payments, right? And that was a decade ago. While here we were barely like, doing anything, but it was all kind of built on old kind of traditional bank rails, like even, and still a lot of the fintech, definitely in the US and probably in a lot of Europe, is built on top of very old, fragmented, expensive infrastructure that companies like Visa and MasterCard and the banks have built. While in emerging markets, they're able to innovate from scratch and build solutions that really work for people that are much more convenient, frankly, and innovative.
Yeah, exciting. Yeah, because that's it. It's like at first I wanted innovation, but I wanted also to feel like I was dealing kind of with a bank that now was different. I didn't want something to replace. You thought, well, what you're describing over there, you would find people that were like, no, there's many other ways to think about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, partially kind of what we try to do with Novi as well, to a large extent. And maybe if we want to kind of talk a little bit about Novi now,
please.
In that we have seen how, the infrastructure for money movement around the world is still extremely outdated. We think we have so many innovations, right? In Europe, like people use Revolut, or, there are a lot of kind of these neobanks, and all of that still uses old infrastructure, right? Those are still integrations with card companies. These are all still built usually using bank licenses. So you need to have a bank behind kind of the company. And the problem there, is that it's expensive. Right. And so companies, kind of some of the tech companies often take on the costs on themselves in order to grow the user base. But it's both expensive, it's very slow. And, I can talk about the US, where like it takes maybe 2 days to settle a bank transfer. It's insane. Like technology takes less than a second, right? Like there is no reason why it should take 2 days until you get paid. It makes no sense. And then the other problem that we were seeing is that, there are so many people who are excluded from this system because it is expensive, because it's not available, on mobile, because it doesn't make sense for banks to serve people who make very little money or who don't have savings. Just in the US alone, I need to check the exact number, but it's something like 25% or 30% of the population that is underbanked. They don't get access to basic financial services, or at least didn't have that until like Square with Cash App, for example, came along and essentially replaced what a bank account would look like for those people. So at Novi, what we try to think about was if we could start from scratch, right? And there's new technology these days, which for us kind of blockchain made a lot of sense because we wanted to build a very robust infrastructure. Can we build essentially a brand new infrastructure for payments to move money around the world that would be as easy as sending a WhatsApp message? So basically the requirements were make it very easy, very simple for users, make it free, and make it instant, right? And so how can we create a global system, right? So you don't also have to, one of the biggest challenges, it's difficult when you try to send money or pay within a country, but when you go cross-border, that's, it's an order of magnitude more complex because the systems are so fragmented. And so it goes between different systems. It's and some of the people, like, for example, migratory workers, who work in a different country and send money back to their families with remittances, they are some of the hardest working, poorest people in the world. They end up paying the most. It can be as much as 10% or sometimes even 15%. of how much they're sending, you know, that they need to pay in fees if they're using Western Union or any of the traditional channels. Same for, you know, cashing checks in the US, for example. People who don't have a bank account and get paid with checks, if they need to cash those checks, they pay something like 5, 6, 7% of what they've earned was fees. And so we really wanted to create a system that could build the WhatsApp for money movement, essentially. You know, that was really our kind of North Star, right? You know, before WhatsApp and before messaging was over the internet, you know, I remember when I was a student studying in the US, I would only allow my mom to call me once a week because it was so expensive, right? Like phone calls, and there was no like really messaging at that time. It was extremely expensive because telcos controlled the lines. But once you had voice over IP and kind of, you know, internet came in, and then WhatsApp, right? Today we can do video calls, it's all free. You can, you know, speak to anyone around the world. And so that was really the vision behind Novi, is to build the new infrastructure for payments around the world. And we thought about it in two different ways. So one was creating that infrastructure, which obviously needed to be independent. Like we didn't want it to be owned by Meta or Facebook at the time, because we wanted anybody to be able to build on top of it. So truly kind of an open system. So that was the Libra Association, which then became renamed as the Diem Association. So they are the ones who essentially built the blockchain infrastructure that then different wallets, different companies could integrate into and use. So that was one piece. And then the second piece that we built ourselves is Novi, and started as Calibra. We love changing our names, so we tried a few different names. It became Novi towards the end, and that was a wallet that Facebook and then Meta was building on top of that.
Just a point on the naming. This is one of my obsessions, especially when I'm working in a team like my students, etc. Is what's the name? How do you call it? We don't have a name. Yes, you do. Give it a name. You change it later. If I don't have a name, I can't refer to it. You know, give me a name. So it's funny when you said that. We love, yeah, but that's it. The important thing is that you have a name. You have to name it. You can't say we don't have a name yet for this. Of course you do. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, 100%. And sometimes, you know, names can be so random, but they work. I think actually, I just saw yesterday a startup in the US, an app that's called Greg. And I was like, what is Greg? Right. And it's an app that helps you take care of your plants. So I have no idea, you know, how they like how
where
Greg
does come from.
But once you know, it's like, okay, cool, Greg, like, you know, that works. So yeah.
Yeah. So now it's called Novi.
Yes, now it's called Novi, and we're actually sort of sunsetting the product for various reasons. So we can talk about what was difficult there. But yes, Novi was the latest. Coming from Nuevo, you know, and kind of like the idea of like innovation and new. And
but you said you're sunsetting the product?
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yeah, so there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot of things happened in the kind of 3 or so years that Libra and Calibra and then Diem and Novi existed. And I can speak to that if that's, or
yeah, tell me a little bit.
Does that?
No? Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that, you know, the vision was something we were all very passionate about and kind of made a lot of sense. Initially, the Libra Association is also one, you know, a lot of companies joined us, actually, a lot of like the more traditional players as well, you know, including Visa, including PayPal. But I think what we realized pretty quickly is that the regulatory landscape for payments is very complex. And the banking lobby is very powerful. So no, there's a lot of tension between tech companies that are now moving into fintech more and more. You know, if everyone, right, from Apple, you know, that's doing really well, obviously with Apple Pay, and they're moving pretty heavily into the payment space. They already have to Google. Same thing, you know, both innovating in the US and developed markets, but also in markets like India. They're investing heavily into building their fintech offerings there. As well as Meta, obviously, and Facebook. For us, for Meta, we actually haven't had a very strong play until Novi in the payment space. So we would only kind of process payments that are done on our platform, or we had some solutions for people who are using Facebook, paying for ads and things like that. But we didn't really move into that space seriously until Libra and Calibra, which is then Novi, came up. But I think it was increasingly obvious that it's an important space to play in. But then what's happening is that you have all these tech companies moving in, and then obviously the banks and and Visa, and the card companies, the more traditional players, are trying to protect their moats, and a big part of the protection is regulatory protection. Because they need to get all these licenses to run their businesses, and they're obviously kind of on the regulatory front. They also want to make sure that consumers are protected, right? It comes to people's money. It's very important. So I think probably the number one mistake we made with Libra was kind of making a huge announcement, a huge splash about us reinventing money, right? And I think there are a few things that scare financial regulators. Probably nothing can scare them more than kind of Facebook coming and saying, we're reinventing money. We're inventing new money. It's going to be the Libra, and everyone is now going to pay with Libra all around the world. Because if you're the central bank and you print money, you may lose control of your macroeconomic monetary policy. So that was the big concern kind of upfront. And I think that, yes. And while the intention was very good, I think that starting more modest up in the beginning would have probably helped us more, right? And not necessarily reinventing the entire thing, which we kind of could do with our resources, right? It's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Because we were like, nobody can do it at this scale, and we had the best talent in the world, people who know payments so well, people who know how to build blockchain technology and innovate and build things that have never been built before, and we can put a lot of resources into this, but we're building everything from scratch, right? Which kind of is antithetical to how you build a startup, right? Normally you try to be very frugal, right? Like be very, do something very small, put it out in the market.
Yeah, nothing is cooler than if you're bootstrapping, everything you get respect and all that, yeah.
Yeah, so in retrospect, if we had started, and that's obviously, that's why it's good to make mistakes. Hopefully you only make them once and then you learn, but I think even for companies like Meta, normally the way we build products is not putting out a huge thing out into the market. It's rather, we notice user behavior. Often we see how people are using our products already. And if there's something that they're doing that there isn't a great fit for, but they're doing anyways. So for example, the way that Facebook Marketplace came to be was that we saw that people on Facebook often try to sell things, and there wasn't a product for that, right?
Yeah.
But they would post just like on their wall, or they would post in some group, that, hey, I'm selling a bicycle, right? And then, but you don't have access to enough people who want to buy that bicycle. Like there was no product market fit for that, but people were doing it anyways, which means that they really need to do it. They had a very strong need, right? Or kind of what we call a people problem, right? Like, how do I sell my stuff?
Yeah, and here you're operating, I mean, any of these, you deal with the people's culture and the trust.
Mm-hmm,
so yeah, you need to implement things in a way that involves them for that. And as you say, if you build trust and don't put it there, it is a different, because people don't understand how shackled they are by banks. Or we don't. I mean, I don't feel it, although I know it's true. I don't feel that. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, you don't feel it because you don't necessarily see the fees that you're paying, and kind of, and for people who are, maybe middle class and up, or like if you're kind of a professional living in a developed country, you're both used to it, and you also, it sort of works. But you don't know how much better it could be.
Yeah, as you say, it's privilege. A friend of mine had a massive loan, and then something happened in his life and he had problems. And when he told me what he was paying, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, and of course he doesn't have social trust, so he can't get a loan like I would. So it does come, the ignoring my shackles comes from the privilege that I'm the part that benefits from the banking system because I get trust.
That's that's an excellent point. And there are a few, so for people in emerging, if we want to talk a little bit about emerging markets, right? If we talk about say like Nigeria or Laos or kind of, you know, countries, there are a number of huge problems that prevent them from having this access to financial services. The first one is identity, actually. So a lot of people don't have ID cards or passports in those countries, right? Like there are countries where you have millions of people who are essentially undocumented because you know their social security system either doesn't exist or isn't structured enough to provide everyone with an ID. Yeah. But that's a huge problem because you cannot bank someone or provide financial services or develop a credit score if you don't know who this person is, and you don't have a way to sort of track, you know, their record, their financial record.
Yeah. So
identity is huge. There is the trust problem kind of stems from identity in many ways. The trust that goes both ways, right? If I'm providing financial services, I need to know who you are and I need to know that I can trust, right? Yeah. You would repay the loan if you're taking a loan, and so there are different ways to build it. I think the way that it's done in the US is actually not great with a credit score, but there's been some great innovation around, you know, creating that track record, whether it's through micro loans where you build kind of track record over time, starting
a behavior that proves your trust.
Yeah, and also kind of community based, right? Because there's like research that shows that if you're lending to a community group, there is much higher chance that people would repay because of their neighbors and because of the community, right? They don't want to default. They don't care about defaulting to a bank or to a fintech company, but they do to their friends. And so identity and then kind of, you know, the track record and building trust both ways is essential. The other one is, you know, is access, right? And so whether it's geographical, yeah, because if I live in a remote village or a remote town, the costs of providing services to me, like if you build a bank branch, it just makes no sense. And so how do you provide access at a reasonable cost, you know, no matter where people are? So there's geographical, you know, proximity or distance, but there can also be technological distance, right? So which is getting that gap has not closed, but is much better now because a lot of people have not only mobile phones, but actually smartphones, or at least, you know, some type of phone that has internet access. So that enables us to provide services in a better way, but access is massive. And another thing that kind of your story about your friend also brought up for me, you know, is another huge problem, which is financial literacy, right? Because even if people have the identity, they can access services, but they don't know, right, what they can get. So they'll take a loan and pay crazy rates. They don't necessarily save, even if they could save a little bit, you know, they spend more than they should. So financial literacy is massive, especially for young people.
It's huge. I always quote that, but I can't find now who the actor was. So in the 70s, an actor was coming up. It was kind of Eddie Murphy before. He was coming up being super successful. And when he moved to LA after making Hollywood movies and being on top of the world, his neighbors were dentists, accountants, middle-class white people. And he was like, these people, because they have the financial literacy and the network to maximize it, with an average middle-class job, they maximize what they have, the investments and the perspectives, while I come in and I splash and I'm just throwing money down the drain because I don't know how to make sense of what I'm buying and what I'm doing with my money. And the new generation of rappers, etc., they're the opposite. They're like, I interviewed for this DJ Trauma, and they're all like, oh, you know, everything they do is very cleverly done in a financial branding. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you with that, but that I find it fascinating how that can be a huge barrier.
Yeah, definitely. And that's true, you know, anywhere around the world. I mean, that's definitely not just emerging markets. It's every country. You know, most people, I think, could benefit a lot by getting some very basic financial literacy lessons in some way, one way or another. I'm
the first. Yeah. Cool. This is so interesting. Do you know what I want to do?
What?
I want to record this and send it to Chimo when he participated in a hackathon, a global hackathon with Facebook. And I tried to do my little community coin experience, because all the things that you know, you would be the perfect consultant. We would have killed it. With
we can try to build Novi again together.
Yeah, with all the knowledge you've got right now. Because what's really cool talking to you, I'm dying to ask you all these vain questions about, because you are, when something like GameStop bounces, you immediately are there. You know what's going on. Well, I'm learning about things through the dramas. So if a cryptocurrency crashes and I'm listening to Crypto Island, VJ Book is explaining it, I'm learning when that happens, but you are one step ahead because you have the knowledge, at least. Do you feel that?
I think a lot of it honestly is influenced by your environment. And so I'm surrounded by people who talk about these things and you know, and kind of live that. And so that's part of it, right? Like if you have people who think about it a lot, and then you kind of get drawn into, you know, it's also something like when I was in university, for example, I was actually studying public and international affairs. So I was surrounded by people who were all into public policy and politics and international relations. And that was my world. I knew nothing about startups, nothing about tech. I didn't even know that like what kind of jobs existed like outside of that world, right? And now living in Silicon Valley, working in tech and like with a lot of fintech people, you know, that becomes a lot of my day to day and my environment. But I guess, yeah, I think if there's an area that you're drawn to, you kind of want to try and surround yourself with people who are.
But do you feel like when any of the things that are on the news, do you feel that that part of your life has a very different perspective from outside there? It's like people might be very, oh, ha, 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 of course, the NFTs is bullshit, blah, blah, blah. While inside, they're looking at it in a different way. Do you feel like it's very segregated or?
Yeah, I think what's maybe different, or like I know people who are building all these things, right? If we're talking about NFTs, OpenSea, which is kind of a big platform for NFTs, I have friends who work there. I have friends who are building, you know, we just announced that we're going to build kind of NFT products with Instagram. And so knowing what it looks like from the inside, you know, gives you a certain perspective. When you read about it in the news, it's often wrong, or it's either wrong or just told actually honestly through very sensationalist kind of populist lens, which, you know, the goal is sort of to raise a lot of emotions one way or another, right? So people get excited about this article and send it to their friends, but there's not a lot of deep kind of honest investigative journalism. And when you see that, actually it's pretty great. So at least, you know, one example, like the Information for Tech, they're very good because they have
wait, what's it called? Information for Tech?
It's the Information.
The Information for Tech,
yeah, unfortunately they have a pretty expensive subscription, but it's called the Information, and they cover tech companies, like both startups and technologies, as well as the large tech companies here. They have insiders in all the companies, and a lot of times their articles, when they publish, it's like, oh shit, how did they, like, it's very accurate, and it's things that are not supposed to be public, but it's very good, and it's pretty deep. So that would be one recommendation.
Did you listen to Crypto Island from VJ Vogt?
I don't actually.
No.
You should check it out.
Well, just check it out. I would love to hear your take, but also he's such a good communicator. because he's really very able to translate feelings into thoughts and make sense of what they mean, and then also give really good references for how that is built. Like he's a really good builder of stories in a way that he has a way, when he's interviewing somebody and the other person gets a bit confused, he has a way to put them at ease and to tell them how they feel. I don't know. I think he's a fantastic journalist, even if he's been into serious trouble. But yeah, give it a listen and tell me what you
Just one
think.
other recommendation for tech stuff. There is a blogger. His name is Ben Thompson. He has he publishes. It's called Stratechery, and he has a podcast as well. And it's very, very good.
Perfect. I'll check it. I got it here. Yeah, I'm gonna follow these because I want to learn a little bit about. This is fascinating. Cool. So what? Tell me a little bit. What do you see ahead of the parts that you can share of what Meta is doing now with the next stage if Novi is sunsetting?
Yeah, so I think our ambitions, I would say, have come down to earth a little bit in that sense. And also David Marcos, who is leading Novi, he departed. He's now announced his new startup, which is building something very similar on top of Bitcoin, actually, but outside of Meta. So he's doing it independently because I think that from a brand and regulatory perspective now, we are in a more complicated place. So him and kind of quite a few people actually from our original team are building a similar idea. So but just really focused on the infrastructure. So they're creating a protocol to send money on top of Bitcoin that other wallets and anybody else could plug into to send money around the world. So they're doing that. On the Meta side, we really just focused primarily on I would say kind of powering commerce on Meta properties, right? And so whether it's Instagram, and kind of people who are shopping on Instagram through Instagram shops or marketplace, or so thinking about all the commerce activity and the payments activity that's taking place, and rationalizing it, consolidating the infrastructure and that payments experience for people who are shopping on the different properties. So that's really kind of the crux of that work.
Yeah.
And I think, kind of if we're thinking about Meta's kind of key stakeholders, right? It's businesses for them, businesses and users. It's a marketplace, right? So you have kind of people and users on one side, then you have businesses on the other side. So if you have a small business, if you're a small business owner, what we try to do is help you find your customers, right? So that kind of goes through ads. And then if you're able to also sell directly, then, it's the value of what you're getting is very clear to you. And so that is really.
Are those the stakeholders that you consider are mostly those? Or are there any other? Yeah. How far?
Those are the primary ones, but there are obviously others, if you're looking at, we have like a news product. And so we also work with media companies for news. We work with developers, so if you're Nike, we have different products like Facebook login, right, that you can plug into your app. So there are other ones, but if kind of, if we want to talk about like who are the main stakeholders, then it's definitely, on the one hand, we want to serve users and just people, to help you connect to other people in the world, so friends and family, as well as other people that you want to follow or that you're interested in. And on the other side, there are brands and businesses, large and small, that the idea there, is helping them get distribution, helping them build a brand through advertising, as well as sell their products. So for example, my sister-in-law, she has a small publishing house in Israel. It's an independent, small publishing company. And for her to compete in the book market in Israel was impossible, because it's a duopoly essentially. There are two large, brands that own 95% of the stores. They set the prices, right? And they do huge discounts, which you cannot really compete with. They set, the prices also for the authors and for their agents. Like they're very powerful. And so she wanted to come in and create a new sort of line of literature that Israelis would be reading. She started with, she's a translator in her profession. And so she brought a lot of literature that wasn't commercial enough to be sold at that scale, but is very high quality and kind of very interesting from a lot of different countries. And so for her, she was like, okay, like how do I build my brand? How do I sell those books? I cannot, I don't want to partner with these. Actually, those large chains wanted her to sell through them, but she wanted, like, that was part of what she was trying to do, is sort of disrupt that business model and do something different. And so by advertising, so she's purely kind of selling online, right? She has a few, she does sell through independent bookstores. There are some independent bookstores that also carry her books, but she was able to build a brand, to build her audience on Facebook and then sell online. And it's that's kind of the beauty of that distribution platform.
And how far do you think we are from that, using the blockchain in those exchanges? Like no, I'm not saying, I know these things, but, Web 3.0, when do you see that it could be part of how we trade and how we live?
It's a great question. There's a huge startup industry right now, right, around it, and people who are building blockchain applications. When is it going to be mainstream? I think that in terms of consumer applications, it's still not quite there, right? Like NFTs is maybe, and there's obviously like Bitcoin and people who trade in crypto, but kind of for your daily life, right? Like if you're signing a contract, when is that, like, until when are you going to need to use lawyers and accountants and kind of all these people that their role is to build trust into a transaction, right? Kind of what Web3 can enable you to do is the technology and what we call smart contracts technology, right? Where the contract is built into the blockchain and it's enforced by the technology, by the blockchain. And so you can really cut out all these middlemen whose role is to establish trust in a transaction where trust doesn't exist because we don't know each other, right? If I'm selling my house to somebody, there are 5 or 6 different layers of brokers and lawyers and accountants and escrow to keep the money until it moves. So all of that could really be solved by a technology company, and you would need all these layers in between, and you could save a lot of money. I think that I don't know, I can speculate.
That's what we want.
Yeah, I think that within a decade, a lot of the transactions we'll be doing will be powered by blockchain. But who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, sometimes things are happening so quickly, and I still have the feeling, it's just a feeling, it's not based on my knowledge about it, but I still have the feeling there's going to be like a big revolution in technology as well, in the blockchain, where a bit like what you were building with Novi, and where instead of it feeling like this arcane code of passwords and all these myths about people that lose it and then they recover it and actually they sold it, all these things, and where it becomes something more connected maybe to your bio signature or something, where it's more, and then these things will they would just take off, like when Web 2.0, because it's hilarious to hear now about Web 1.0 and how people thought that was the coolest ever, and it was just the ugliest thing in the world. And so we will look at Web 2.0 and go, remember when we thought that Airbnb was cool? It was so clunky, and we got excited because we were not paying to the hotel and we just paying to Airbnb, you know what I mean? So I think there's going to be some couple of small and big tech developments.
Yeah, I mean, the other one, that Meta is heavily investing into is the metaverse, right? And kind of this idea that not just virtual reality, but really, AR. So where you are able to interact in the real world, but with an additional information layer or, on top of that. And so it's the augmented reality that may change how we do everything. And so you may not need to have a phone or a computer in front of you the way we do now, but maybe you have like a cool pair of glasses like the ones you're wearing now, but you're seeing me already in those glasses. You're able to move your hands and things happen. And so
yeah, at uni they have a couple of the haptic feedback suits, and where you feel the pressure and everybody's going mental, and they're just, people were crazy to test them and all those things. Yeah, they're coming. It's you just the idea of how you engage also with information and with something that's happening when you are immersed. It's just when things sink and they start to feel real. Amazing, but cool.
Yeah.
So what do you think is a cool challenge that you have, Malvina, or what do you think that that could be a good challenge? Or is there anything that you're looking, so like, that you think, this is something that I would like to test with people or hear proposals? What's going on at work? What do you think?
There's so many. I mean, there are so many great things that we could build and solve for people. I think that the areas I'm most passionate about, is democratizing access or creating equal opportunity for people, no matter where they were born or who they were born to. And so, Novi was one way to tackle it from a financial access perspective. The other area that I'm very passionate about is also education, actually, which, if you couple sort of access to education and opportunities together with access to financial tools and financial literacy, you can really unlock so much talent and so much potential for people around the world. So I think that is generally sort of the space that I'm very excited about, as well as the future of work, right? Because it all kind of connects, right? If you're unlocking opportunity for people around the world, then working in more flexible ways and more, how do you build teams of people? How do you kind of train them and up level their skills? That is another super interesting area. If I had to pick one, do I need to pick one?
Yeah, please, if you could pick one, what do you think?
The challenge I would pick, I would say actually maybe kind of in this kind of intersection of education and work. And so I would say, like, how might we enable a child, no matter where they are in the world, to build a fulfilling life and to unleash their potential? Is that too broad?
No. I love it. Because immediately I'm thinking, when you have a child, I went to Lima once to work up in the mountains with the teachers and tried to work on the digital literacy, because they had a phobia. This was 10 years ago, and the teachers had a phobia for tech, because they thought the little kids were only getting violence and porn in the cabins. When they were going, they would get one little coin and 14 children would jam in a little cabin and they would be playing games. And they were children. They were not getting any violence and porn. None of that was happening. It was just kids playing with. And it was so interesting to work with the teachers to try to change the way they saw tech, and from here, I was getting abused by some large charity who was saying that those people needed water and they didn't need tech. And I felt horrible. And then when I arrived in the teachers, the biggest thing I did was open Google Maps and fly around the world. And the teachers were screaming of excitement because I showed them the little village, San Pedro de Chorrillos, where the school was, and blah, blah, blah. So I think sometimes we forget that access to a little bit of an educational tool, the tools that we got excited with 15 years ago, but that are now normal in our lives, like Wikipedia and access. So those things can be so meaningful. And so what could you do? What could you do that would be a project that we could propose to Meta, that to say, oh, what about this? Like, are we going to pitch you a project? How about that?
Yeah. I mean, that would be amazing. And, you know, we're also kind of building products for younger people, like Messenger Kids, for example, which is sort of the idea of creating a messaging platform for kids that is very safe, you know, where they cannot chat to anybody, but just specific people. So that, you know, to me, I think my first use of technology when I was a kid, it was my friend had a computer, you know, like with a modem, like dial in, where you had to take over like the house phone line, and then your parents yell at you that they need to make a phone call. And we would get on ICQ, which was kind of I think it was the first chat platform where you could talk to people in other countries. I remember how exciting it was just to suddenly like talk to somebody who's like, I don't know, in Spain or, you know, in Thailand, you know, and just like get to know people, or, you know, that was so exciting. I think for somebody who, especially as a child, your world is pretty small. And, you know, if you live in a village, especially if you're not like in a big city, that you're so exposed. And, you know, I think part of unlocking opportunity for people is for them to see what they could do, right? What's out there. And for that, you need that connection, you need that access. You need to be able to see Google Maps and see, this is the world, right? I can go wherever I want, you know. How do I do that, you know, is maybe more complex, but maybe there are role models, maybe there are ways that, you know, I could find my way. But you first need to know that it's even out there, that you could aspire, you know, to get there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this, of course, is, as you were saying with the chat for kids, is about safety, but you always have the operators, you have the schools, you have the teachers, you have the parents with whom you can use to access the door for the kid. And also you're not just opening the internet for that kid to unsafely. Yeah, cool. How interesting. And so that's a really good challenge, I think, for us in the masters, to talk about the intersection of education and work and how to enable a child to build a fulfilling life.
Yeah, I guess the education, work, and technology, right? And how we could use technology and access to technology in order to help kids kind of envision their future and equip them to fulfill their potential. Yeah.
What about you? Is there anything that you're looking at now that you think, I would like to learn more, or are you're there in the blockchain and that's the world in which is quite fast paced and intense?
I'm always I'm always learning. When I feel like I'm not learning, I get bored, and that's when I kind of look for something new. The things I'm very interested in right now is like future of work, and kind of, especially with COVID and like the last 2 years, you know, have changed a lot how we work, and we're seeing it every day with all the companies around us, right? Airbnb just announced that everybody can work remotely and be based wherever they want. I think that also creates a lot of new challenges. And so it's going to be interesting to see how people and companies overcome that, right? Because we know that, you know, for education, same, right? Like, I would not want to do my entire university experience sitting here on my laptop. And so human connection is so important as well. So how do we build that, you know, combination of flexibility and convenience by using technology to do our work, but also maintain our humanity and the fulfillment we get from connecting with other people and feeling part of a community that's not only virtual, but also, you know, physical, right? Like, I cannot give you the hug I want to give you when we're on a Zoom call.
Yeah, but I think some of those, we will understand the cycles and the rhythms, which we don't, because I think because of my education, maybe that also weighs something on that, the way I've been trained to work. But if I never meet somebody ever, and I only work remotely, I have a very different relationship. If I only meet them once a year, that's enough to have a bit more of a feeling of belonging together. But the other day I met a colleague who I love working with, who's a really nice guy. And I get on with him like a house on fire at work. It's so easy. And I didn't realize I had never met him. It was the first time we met in person. And he was like, no, mate, we've never met. I was like, really? I can't believe, because I feel so close, despite always being remote. So it's really, I find it really, I don't know the rules yet, even for me, you know what I mean? I'm still discovering what works and what feels or not. I find it fascinating, and I agree. We will learn to handle ourselves in the communities.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll need to figure this out, right? Because for anyone, like whether you're, building an educational institution and kind of, or a company or whatever it is, right? We need to figure out, how do we build teams? How do we help people feel like they belong? How do we build a culture, right? And also, how do we collaborate effectively? So those are some of the things I've been thinking about for quite some time, but now it's becoming a lot more, I think, obvious.
Well, you've always I always remember you like somebody that for whom belonging, communities, all that was always part of your discourse, and the way you thought about what you wanted to do was very much rooted on those values, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think, and actually at Meta, before I worked on Novi, I worked on Facebook groups, which is very kind of our community-based product. And before that, we built developer circles, which was a global community for developers. So yeah, I very much believe in the power of community to help individuals kind of, both on an emotional level, but also in terms of accomplishments and up-leveling ourselves. I think that the people we surround ourselves with and are such a huge part of who we are.
Oh yeah, that thing, the minimal amount of humanity is not in one person, it's in a community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're like the ants. Yeah, we need the group to make sense of who we are. You don't know unless you have the whole community of ants, the whole herd. You don't know what the animal is, and we need that belonging to define who we are as well.
Absolutely.
Totally. Excellent. Well, that was so interesting. Yeah, and what a challenge. Love it. I'm gonna
covered a lot of ground. I hope there is kind of, enough to work from.
Oh, you bet. There will be a lot here. I'm gonna pause recording.